Hello everybody, this is Jasmina and I'm going to talk in this video about my own class years, at least the ones that um, beyond basically once you start being an adult, because kids' class years usually aren't a big deal. But again, don't put your birth date or time into the comments. I do not do Batsa, and that greatly increases your chance of identity theft. So most or many people, maybe even most, become quite concerned about what can happen during a clash year. And that is when the animal sign of the year clashes with your year animal sign. Now, I do believe that some, but not all, Batsa practitioners use fear of clash years to drum up business. Now, I do question the ethics of this because some people uh, are better at dealing with clash years than others, but I do acknowledge that this is likely to be a way to increase your business, to have more people seek um, recommendations. Most of these people who are doing Batsa, they're doing it for a living. So they want to earn enough money to live off of. I understand that. So this is just another sales tactic. I just think you could do it better. But then again, I'm not worrying about making money because I can retire, you know, and get Social Security. So I don't need this. Now, it is a well-known fact that fear sells. Some politicians and parties use fear to get elected, and I see that very clearly here in the United States. Many, if not most, religions use fear. And I'm not dissing any particular religion, they all pretty much act the same way. The details are different, but fear of what might happen when you die is the big thing. Now, many products also are sold through fear. Um, the security systems, the LifeLock, which locks your people can't take out loans, and neither can you unless you give them a keyword or something like this. So uh, this is these products sell through fear. So your clash years for most people will occur when you are 6 and then every 12 years afterwards. And that, again, is for most people. But if you were born in the month of the ox or the tail end of the rat, then your clash years are a year earlier. Now, the tail end of the rat are the first few days in January. So if you were born from January 1st up to the Chinese Solar New Year date, up to the day before that, that is, then you are going to have these years be your clash years. And I've already shown this, but I'll show it again to make it a little more clear. If a person is born in 1994, they have a rooster as their year animal sign. And you can check this. You can just stick it into even Joey App's thing. Totally fine. That means their clash year was last year, the year of the rabbit, because rooster and rabbit clash, and they were 29 years old at the time. A person born anytime after February, probably 4th, I don't know exactly that year when it changed, but certainly if you were born February 6th or later, all the way to the end of December of this same year, you have a dog as your year animal, and this year, the dragon year, will clash with you. And this would be the year when you turn 30. Now, some people dread these years, and I mean, really, really dread them, and think the worst will ever happen. They just freak out. Let's put it that way. Now, if they have Chief or Nine Heaven as their guardian spirit, they probably will have a really difficult year because these two spirits, people with these two spirits, basically have 100% connection to their guardian spirit 24/7, 365. Never ends. So the more you worry and the less you envision a positive future, the more likely whatever you worry about will come true. So if you happen to have Chief or Nine Heavens, be really, really careful about worrying, especially during a class year, because worry doesn't usually mean anything. This is just what your mind does when it hasn't got better things to do. Now, what does exactly a class year do? Well, basically, class years means there's going to be changes in your life. Sometimes they're quite abrupt, sometimes they're a little more gentle, but you will know, like from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, that something has changed in your life. It often occurs in parts of your life that you've been neglecting. So, and it could be parts of a part of your life, if you know what I mean. Like it could be a particular aspect of your business or your career, not all of it, but just a particular aspect. Or maybe it's something with a relationship where it's just a particular aspect that you neglect. Now, most people want to know if you can mitigate a clash year. Well, no, you cannot. But if you are prepared for change and meet the problems head on, you usually deal with the problem when it's small, and then it no longer is a problem, and it makes your year much, much smoother, and you will have probably learned something very useful by tackling the problem. Basically, if you every year, if you do some education and you meet many smaller challenges instead of sweeping them under the rug and I'll deal with it later, if you do that in the years before a clash, you usually can meet any challenges that happen in the class year much more successfully because you will have more skills. You will have more tools you can call upon to fix the problem that can occur in a class year. So again, the more skills you have, the less of a challenge a class year will be. Now, most people's first two class years are not much of a problem. You are a child, basically. You're barely an adult at these years, but you know, you still most of the time have a decent amount of support from your parents. Now, I will go over my two class years. So actually, I've had three since the age of 17. At 29, my ex-fiance threatened me, and I broke off our 7-year relationship. And of course, I knew I wasn't going to marry this guy, but um, I I had done enough hinting to realize that he was not going to take that very well. So I was basically, I mean, our relationship was not going well, and even he realized that we weren't going to get married, but I wanted him to end it because if he ended it, problem would be solved. Because if he decided to go back on it, go, no, no, you decided this, and that would be it. I mean, that would have been easy, but he crossed the line, and it was a line that in my opinion, was not something to be crossed. And he threatened me, so that was it. It was over. Now, after that, he shifted between apologizing and thinking I would accept it. And then when I didn't, he would get very angry and start threatening more. And it was this typical thing of a person that's obsessed. Um, and I mean, this is not that unusual. Other people have experienced this too. Now, during semester break, we were both graduate students at the time. The situation got much worse and constant harassment. So I sought a court order to stop him from harassing me, just to have him leave me alone, get on with his life, let me get on with mine. Of course, he challenged it in court, and I wasn't surprised at that. I didn't do much during this thing. I was on the stand for a few minutes. He got on the stand and he spent nearly all of the time explaining why he believed he had the right to harass me. Of course, that didn't go over very well. He just thought he had the right to harass me. And so, of course, it was the court order stood. He did not win. Now, by the time this actually had happened, that is the court being in court, I was out of my class year. But I don't think it would have made any difference because this guy would have done what he did. Now, he was not in a class year at all. And, he was clear of any clashes at this time, at least as far as I know. Now, the next one was at 41, and because again, I was born in the month of the ox. Now, in late pig or early rat month, I can't remember, but it was basically right after Thanksgiving. Um, there was a crisis that occurred at work, and basically, I needed to do the work a student had been trying to do for 2 years. I had to do it in less than 3 weeks because I had a conference where I was going to do the presentation. So, um, so I mean, it was coming up, and so I said, "Well, what new data do you have?" I said that to the student. What progress have you made from last year? Which was I shouldn't have waited so long, but the response was, "I'm totally lost," and I'm sure my jaw dropped. There was no reason to get angry because it's my fault, but so the first thing I remember saying is, "Show me what the problem is, not why you can't solve it, but show me what is the problem you're trying to solve mathematically." And I should have been more insistent that the student give me weekly or at least monthly presentations on their work, but I did not. So I learned a lesson, and a very important lesson. Now, when I was a graduate student, my PhD advisor made me give a weekly presentation. So, and this is to make sure that I was making progress, and if I were having trouble, they could direct me in the right way. I did not have time to do that with the student, and I really regret that because I think that they could have learned a lot too. Now, because the conference was only 3 weeks away and I was doing the presentation, we just needed to get something done. And so when I looked at the problem within a day, I was very certain how to solve it. I mean, I recognized the problem as something called a boundary value problem, which will be meaningless to everybody who is not a scientist. But anyway, this is something I took a class with, which the student did not. Now, this isn't my student. I was a postdoc. My boss, the professor, this student was his student, but because he had too many students, he would farm out some of the students to his postdocs. And so this was the one I was responsible for. And anyway, this student hadn't had the same class. So they didn't recognize how to do it. And because I said, well, this is just a boundary value problem. And they said, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I said, okay, let me just solve this, get this done. We got to get something done. And so I basically just took over, did some very quick solved it very quickly, and the student programmed it while I started creating the poster, and um, it was a thing where a poster was given as a presentation. So um, so we both worked like mad for those 3 weeks, and I think we finished 2 days early, and so that was a relief that we actually finished. But there was some really good things that came out of here. Now, that was a lot of hard work to get that done. But because of this and discussions that we had, I realized that this gold standard, I mean, they actually called it that. That's why it's in quotes. Method to solve this kind of problem wasn't doing the math correctly. This gold standard wasn't actually used. People would check against it, but it wasn't actually used because it was so onerous for the computers of the day that it just spent too much time, and you couldn't run a big program where this was a part of it because it would take too much time. So this is why you compare your method to the gold standard. So that ended up to be a pretty significant paper, and I had people at conferences actually find me and say, am I doing this problem correctly? Because obviously boundary value problems isn't taught in that field very often, or at least students don't take the class. Now, as a physicist, it wasn't required, but my professors, when I was an undergraduate, since they knew I was going to be a theoretician, because I'm pretty sucky at being a experimentalist, they say, take this class, it'll do you a lot of good. And they were right. Now, over the next year, after I left this class year, um, I was looking at some behavior that was unphysical. That is, it made no physical sense for this to happen, and it didn't agree with experimental data. And in this, I discovered something really peculiar about the equations that was also apparent in the gold standard, too. It also had the same problem. And I understood how to fix this with a physically realistic solution that only kicks in at certain times. And it got rid of like 95% of the discrepancy the with the experiment. And so it's really even more significant. And so this, but I never actually published it. I actually started to see. First thing I did is, okay, this is significant, but let's see if somebody else has already written this, because I really hate writing papers. As far as I know, nobody else on this planet understands it. And and this was always my goal, to learn something that no one else understood, because science was not my first love. You know, it was, but I was good at it. So, go with what you're good with. That's kind of my parents' model anyway. So I, but once I discovered this, it was like, okay, I've met my goal. It's time to move on. In 3 months' time, I knew I was leaving physics. Or, well, in that case, it was actually climate change. I knew I was moving on to do something other than science because I met my goal. Now, my latest class year at 83, I basically don't remember anything of being a problem. I did decide to start learning more feng shui and qigong, but it wasn't because I had problems, it was because I was interested. And I had no idea I would ever create a business. Where I live, I can't work for somebody who does feng shui because, as far as I know, nobody did it, um, especially at that time. So I just wanted to use it for myself. Now, we had moved back from Hong Kong about a year, a little over a year before this, and I wanted to move out of the suburbs where we had been living and move closer to the city. And I also wanted to make sure I kept my CAD skills, that's computer aided drafting, and use it to design my own house because, I found that to be quite fun. And my sixth luck pillar had already started, and I could not find a job. Also, jobs were really hard to come by at that time, but I wanted to be able to keep my skills ready so that I could take work when it came along. When we left for Hong Kong, I had two standing job offers from people working in the city where I lived then. And but when I came back, those people were no longer working for those companies, and they were off in other states, or other cities. I don't even know where they went. Um, so those job offers evaporated, obviously. So I kept busy. Now, all of this occurred because I stumbled that, oh, there's a lot more information about Chinese metaphysics available on the web than when I started learning from books back in the 1990s. So I had the opportunity. It just happened to hit the right time. And but again, no problems. I don't remember any problems I had at this time. Um, other than, I have to find the right, so I have to find the right piece of land or the right house that we can move into in the city. So that's about when I really started looking. Now, if you are extremely lucky, you can have an easy life, and your Batsa might indicate this. But remember, there are 30,000 people, at least 30,000 people, who are born with the exact same Batsa that you have, that do not have an easy life because of the circumstances that we're born into. They could be in an abusive family. They could be in a poor country where there are no decent opportunities. Um, they could have, you know, been involved with accidents that changed their body or their brain so that they can't work. I mean, that's a small minority, but there are some. But basically, it's really where they live that makes the big difference. So BATSA, this is something to remember. BATSA only shows potential, but it does not show opportunity. Opportunity can be improved using feng shui, but resilience is more important. And this is something that has some component in your BATSA, but it also has to do with how you're brought up. But of course, um, it is the other thing, of course, is important is where you live. Some countries have much more opportunity than others. So, and that's just, basically luck of the draw. Now, if you happen to have a very low 7 killings, that can make resilience a challenge for you. Or if you have low metal, that is also very similar. So either one of those can make it hard for you to be highly resilient. That is, you really have to work at being resilient. It doesn't come naturally to you. Now, resilience can be predicted by your BATSA, but your parents are often a key to making you resilient. So, allowing children to struggle with problems can build their resilience. So, don't be a helicopter parent. So, I'm basically just talking to the people who actually have kids right now and that are still quite young. And of course, you don't let them get super frustrated, but you also don't do things for them because kids of helicopter parents, when they grow up, they make really helpless adults, basically. Now, in my opinion, and I'm sure not everybody shares this, but an easy life is often a boring life. And I think that's one reason why many people who grow up rich are thrill seekers and take up dangerous sports, because this is how they they need some danger in their life, and that's why they do it. To me, and again, it's my opinion, I think a challenging life is much more fulfilling and much more rewarding because you tackle problems and move, and that helps you move forward. I think that a challenging life can also have a much bigger positive effect on the world. Now, the United States is a much better place due to the civil rights movements than it was before that. I fully acknowledge that things are still not, like really good in the US, not really fair, but it is much improved to before the civil rights, which is in the 1960s. I know I never would have been able to have the opportunity to receive a PhD or even pursue a PhD in physics if it were not for Martin Luther King Jr. So he changed my life, even though he died when I was still a child. He was assassinated. So this is what a challenging life can do. It can make the world a better place. And so I think you should challenge yourself to become better. And I think you should challenge yourself every single year. Try something new every year. Learn something new every year. It improves your creativity. It makes you more resilient because you have a larger skill set to draw upon when problems arise. And what you learn and experience in your non-class years will allow you to meet the challenges of a class year with a lot more success because you have more skills to draw upon. So I'm hoping this will help people deal with class years with um, passion and bravery and get something done. These years can be your best years. They were challenging when you lived them, but when you look back on them, you say, wow, that year changed my life. And that's what a class year is supposed to do. So I'd like to thank you guys again for watching.